Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another podcast session today with Maulana Suleiman Ravat and myself. And we are unpacking a very important topic today. We are looking at family dynamics, family politics, and we know that in every family, somebody is not speaking to someone, and there's always tension at a time of a function or when there's something happening in the family. And we always bring up some of the issues of the past. So today, to help us navigate around these issues, we have Maulana Suleiman Rawat, our programs manager at Radio Islam, as well as the drive time presenter for Sabah al Muslim on Radio Islam International. Maulana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Habib.
Maulana, why this topic?
Well, one you've outlined in your intro. Almost every family are plagued by family politics. But the reality is this, that strong families make strong societies and strong societies make a strong ummah. As long as families are going to be weakened because of the internal politics, then societies will remain weak and the ummah will remain weak and divided and disunited. We're all crying about unity. In light of what's happening in Palestine and other parts of the world, we're saying unity, unity, unity. It doesn't start from the top down, it starts from the bottom up. So there's a lot of things that we can't control. But what happens within our families and actually our own actions, we can control. So that's a good starting point. That for the sake of your own happiness, because happiness comes from relationships, and for the sake of the strength of your society and for the ummah, we can't strive for a perfect family. Like there's no perfect marriage, there's no perfect family. There'll be the ups and downs, there'll be the challenges. But to manage it such that we don't weaken the family structure, that is important for us personally and for the ummah collectively, and hence the topic.
Now, there are many reasons why people are not talking in the family and there's issues in the family. One of them is Maulana, inheritance and money issues.
Money issues is perhaps the most important issue that we need to discuss. And the key word here is ambiguity. You see, the problem that we face and the mistake that many of us make is we forget the Arabic proverb that live like brothers but deal like strangers. We say, no, it's my brother. He asked me for 10,000 rands. He needed to buy something. So here's a 10,000. Nothing written. No negotiation or conclusion around how long will you take to pay me back. Then that 10,000 rands becomes the reason that the brothers stop speaking, that the sister-in-laws are insulting each other, that the cousins now are hambrawing each other. Yeah, you know, that time your father took money from my father and never paid or took long to pay. There mustn't be ambiguity. The Quran has put down the principles. The Hadith have put down the guidelines. The closer you are in relationship, the more important it is to make sure that there's no ambiguity. You write it down. My brother, you need 10,000. I'm going to get double reward. Right? I'm helping you out, and it's charity and it's family relationships that I'm maintaining, but we write it down. I'm lending it to you on this date. This is the amount you're going to pay back every month, and this is the date by which it needs to be settled. Inheritance is another issue. Sometimes fathers say, my children will sort it out. Or we just lackadaisical. We don't sort out our affairs in our lifetime. Then we pass on, and we think we're not going to be accountable for not doing what we're supposed to do. And the children start fighting. There's too much of ambiguity. No, Ma said that the house must come to me. No, Abba said that car was for me. He bought it for me. It belonged to me. No, that the car didn't belong to you. It was Abba's car. He was only borrowing it to you. So these things we didn't clarify. And Sharia, if you follow the Sharia, then there'll be clarity. You write it down that this is a gift. It's to that person. Now, even if you gave your son a gift and your son dies before you, it's his, right? If he decides to sell it, it's his. Family business, right? It brings in a lot of barakah and blessings, but then it also creates a lot of tension within the family. The father doesn't stipulate that you know what your salary is. You're just taking from the business. Now the one brother is taking more, the other one is taking less. Then the siblings, their children come into the business. Everything must be properly structured. You must remove ambiguity and things must be written down. Otherwise, that very same family business becomes the reason that the family for generations after that are at each other's throats. Not only don't they talk, they're only talking bad about each other.
Very sad indeed. Another area of concern, Malana, that becomes a very sensitive point and a point of tension is the in-law issues, whether it's from the husband side or the daughter-in-law side, or whichever point of view you look at. The in-laws tend to create a lot of tension in the relationship.
With a few very rare exceptions, there will be tensions in that kind of a relationship, right? So we must be realistic. It's about managing the tensions. It's about navigating the turbulence. Two extremes you must avoid. Every daughter-in-law is not from hell and every mother-in-law is not from hell. So we find sometimes that this negative mindset. A daughter-in-law goes into a marriage saying, I'm going to show from day one that I'm not like the daughter-in-laws of previous generations, that I must do all your dirty work and I must look after your house, but your daughter still remains the queen. I married your husband, I married your son, I didn't marry you. So you're coming in with a negative, aggressive mindset. And every mother-in-law is thinking, from day one, I will establish my authority here. This is my house, my son. I worked for all of this. You're not going to come and change everything. Don't have that mindset. Is an extreme mindset. Another extreme mindset is, no, I'll treat my mother-in-law like my mother. I'll treat my daughter-in-law like my daughter. It's not biologically reasonable. The biological link between your mother-in-law and her daughter will always be different. Now, if you understand that even though if you're living with your mother-in-law and doing everything for her, when her daughter comes and she shows her greater affection, you'll understand. It's a mother-daughter relationship. A more realistic way of dealing with it is to say, I will try and treat my mother-in-law the same way I would like my daughter-in-law to treat me one day. And I will treat my daughter-in-law the same way I would want another woman to treat my daughter. I think that is where we need to, kind of position ourselves. The second thing is, appreciate that there's going to be generational differences. You were brought up by your mother that, we make our own samosas, Ramadan time. We roll our own rotis. We don't get from outside. Your daughter-in-law comes from a different generation. If your son has got the money and he's willing to spend the money to buy rotis, to buy samosas, if that works for them, keep your opinion to yourself. You must understand that the new generation does things differently. It's not halal and haram. It's not catastrophic by Shari'i standards, maybe by your cultural standards. How can this be that, they're buying roti? My son is eating that roti substandard. If your son is happy to eat it and happy to pay for it, don't get involved in that. On the other hand, the younger generation must also understand, don't remove the elders from the equation altogether. No, listen, your mother must have no say. Your father must have no say. The ultimate say in terms of how you raise your children, how you run your house, is with you and your husband. But understand, like one day you would also want to give some guidance to your children. They also want to give guidance. To the parents, we'll say the helping hand, not the imposing hand. Give a helping hand, not an imposing hand. But to the youngsters, we'll say, make them also feel valued. Make them also feel appreciated. Don't make them feel that she has totally divorced us from whatever happens in their life.
So what does the partner do when he's caught up in the middle, whether it's the husband or the wife, when it is the tension coming from his parents or her parents' side? How do you balance the thing when you are in the middle as the partner? On one side, it's your in-laws, and on the other side, it's your partner, and all these things. What do you do?
As far as possible in today's time and age, try and stay separate. And if you have to stay in the same premises, then try and have a separate kitchen or a separate quarters so your wife has her privacy. Then after that, no matter where you stay or what you do, there's going to be these tensions. My ustad told me when I got married, he said, the husband's function is to be like a sponge. When the water messes, you just got to mop it up. You got to absorb it. Remember, if you listen to your mother, and if you have to even tell her one or two things, even if she gets upset, she'll forgive you because you're the son. But if your wife says it, she may never want to forgive her. If you tell your wife something, she'll be cross with you. Maybe you'll get a cold shoulder for 1-2 nights. But if your mother says it to her, it's going to be far worse. So you got to absorb it. Most of the time, like you always say in the talks that you give, they just want to vent. So let them vent. Listen. Don't get defensive. Oh, my mother, my wife. No, listen. Just listen. Okay, I understood. I'll have a word with her. And at times, remember, there's no such rule in Islam. Your mother is always right. That's not part of finding Jannah under your mother's feet. Jannah under your mother's feet is you must respect your mother and do what you have to do for your mother. When your wife is right, then diplomatically and respectfully, you've got to bring that to the notice of your mother, and you've got to fulfill the rights of your wife as well. So the task here is the husband is going to man up. He's going to man up. He's going to become the buffer, and he's going to be the sponge.
Let's talk about comparison and competition in families.
This we must avoid from a young age. Sometimes as parents, we do it without realizing. Look at your report. Your brother did so well. You already 4 years in Hifz class. Your brother did Hifz in 2 years. Look at your sister's rotis. And so neat. Look at your... So what happens is we're putting siblings against each other subconsciously. And then they carry that into their adulthood. And then they transfer it to their children. And that resentment and that bitterness continues. And then in your old age, you start to see the consequences of that playing out amongst your siblings. Amongst your children, rather. So avoid that from a young age. The second thing is also now, every daughter-in-law is not going to be the same. Every son-in-law is not going to be the same. Be careful with your words. And you may naturally, like you have more affection for one child, you may have more affection for one daughter-in-law or for one son-in-law. But once you start to show it and make it very obvious, either in words or in action, then you're going to create that rivalry. Now, I'm never good enough. It's the other daughter-in-law because she's the favorite son's wife and she's the queen. Therefore, try and avoid this comparison so that it doesn't need to competition. Try and appreciate each person for their own unique attributes and for their own unique contributions. The one daughter-in-law maybe is more hardworking. The other daughter-in-law maybe has got another strength. And in a team also, you don't need everybody with the same strengths. You need different people with different strengths. Because when comparison goes out of hand, either direct comparison or indirect comparison, then competition sets in. And when competition sets in, then that rivalry erodes at the family relationship. It's now people are competing against each other for the affection, or they're not doing, or they're doing just because they want to get back at somebody, and that creates a lot of politics within the family.
So the key question here, Manana, is that what are the solutions?
It comes back to what we said in the beginning. You've got to understand that a strong family is not only about you, it's about the ummah. It's about you in the sense that if the family is strong, it'll give you a lot of fulfillment. And it's about the ummah. If the family is strong, the ummah is strong. So for that, you can't have a tit for tat thing. And the hadith says also, family relations is not about you do, I'll do. You don't do, I don't do. You show me, I'll show you. That's not the way of Muslims. It's about being better. Not for that person to appreciate or to reciprocate. It's about being better for the sake of Allah and to see the big picture. And for that, you need a big heart. You need a big heart, and you must be willing to forgive. You must be willing to walk away. The hadith says you walk away from an argument and you are wrong, you get a house on the outskirts of Jannah. If you are right and you walk away from an argument, you get a house in the prime area of Jannah. We must think of Yusuf alayhi salam. He could have taken revenge and he would be justified, but he saw the bigger picture. The bigger picture is, I got no time to take revenge from my brothers. I have to save a nation from famine. When Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam came back to Makkah, I got no time to take revenge for what they did to me and to my family. I have an ummah to build. So we want to protest and march and cry over what's happening in Palestine, and justifiably so. But then you don't want to strengthen your family by letting go of the petty stuff. And even if it's serious stuff, forgiving for the pleasure of Allah. Look at what they did to Fatima radiallahu anha. Look at what they did to Zainab radiallahu anha. Caused a lot of pain to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he forgave because he had an ummah to build. Whether they appreciated or not, whether they reciprocated or not. So for families to function, you've got to rise above the pettiness. You've got to then say, okay, I'll process my own pain and forgive for the pleasure of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. Another important thing in terms of a solution is give people the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes with outside people, we're willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, but when it comes to our own family, we always assume the worst. Whereas the Quran says, "Ijtanibu kathiran min adh-dhann." Don't overthink things. Don't become overly suspicious. Oh, what are they talking? Must be talking about me. Oh, her mood was off today. Maybe she woke up with a headache. Maybe she woke up. It's not about you. It's not that because you came to visit and she was being called to. Maybe she woke up. Maybe you came to visit and just before that 5 minutes, she and her husband had a fight. So that's why she's not in the best mood. Gossip is what's killing families, especially in the WhatsApp age. This one telling about that one. The status wars, putting cryptic messages on the WhatsApp status, trying to knock each other. Remember one thing about life and family also. Man naqala ilayka naqala anka. Whoever comes to you with stories will go from you with stories about you. So keep quiet, right? If you got frustration, pour it out in front of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala and deal with it with the very immediate people like your husband, etc. Don't talk to everybody. Yeah, she was like this. Oh, you must see that function. Oh, like this. Then the word is going to travel. People are going to put masala and it erodes at the family stability. For families to function with the tensions that are natural and with the differing temperaments and all of that, you need cool heads. You need sober minds. You need people who are not going to get emotionally carried away. You told my daughter like this. You said like this to my son. No, those two children, cousins who are fighting on the soccer field, after 10 minutes will be playing again. But then their fathers and their mothers are not speaking to each other for years. I'll conclude by saying the most important part of the solution is control your tongue and control your thumb. Watch what you say, especially when it comes to family. Always say good things, praise people, compliment people, acknowledge people. Don't have a sharp tongue. Don't be sarcastic. Don't gossip. And be careful on that WhatsApp with your thumbs. Otherwise, just one WhatsApp message can create absolute chaos in the family.
So in your experience, Mona, how long does it take for the tension to subside and for people to get back onto track again?
It depends on the factors that we discussed. The earlier people are in a mindset of willing to forgive for the pleasure of Allah, and in the earlier people get to control their emotions or get to grip with their emotions and the cool heads prevail, the quicker it will be solved. There's nothing that's unsolvable. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came back to Makkah. I mean, if you look at it, 13 years of Medina and then 8 years, 2 decades later. but the matter was solved. Yusuf alayhi salam's brothers came in front of him how many years later after what happened? But the matter was solved. So we can't say that, because a dispute is going on for 10 years or 20 years in the family, that now it's reached a point where it can't be solved. It can be solved. If some parties are willing to solve it, then obviously you say, all right, what's next best? But if the fundamentals are there, it can be solved. However, prevention is better than cure. When something happens, try and resolve it as quickly as possible by being the first that is willing to forgive, being the first that is willing to come out and say, okay, let's discuss it and resolve it.
What's the role of the seniors in a family? What about them becoming active in this regard? Sometimes they become the source of tension, and sometimes they're just inactive, and sometimes they can become a source of a lot of khair.
I think seniors need to play that senior role when things are going out of control. They can't just say that, oh, they both my children, I don't want to get involved. No, I mean, if you're sitting here and your children are stabbing each other, your two sons, you're not going to say, hey, all right, he's my son, I don't want to offend either of them. That is wrong. You've got to come in a way where you don't come across as partisan, that you're taking one part over the other, and speak to them separately, speak to them collectively, and try and prevail upon them so that some sort of peace can be found. More importantly is what you said, do not intentionally or unintentionally become the source of conflict. Like maybe sometimes say your husband has passed on, now you're a widow. Now you go to your one son's house and maybe that daughter-in-law is a little bit not as progressive or not as forthcoming in your khidmah. Now you go to the other son and you say something. And then that son says to the first son, your wife like this, your wife like that, she didn't give mommy a good face. Now your two sons are fighting. Then you sit and you cry, rather go to the qabr, go put me in an old age home. You people are fighting, but you caused it. Yeah. Don't take stories from the one side to the other side. Then you're going to create tensions between your daughter-in-laws. So as a senior, make sure that you don't become the cause of problems. When you see others are becoming a cause of problems, caution them. And if for whatever reason problems have set in, then try and play the role of mediator.
We say Jazakumullah khairan to Maulana for that wonderful discussion. And we are taught in the Sunnah, these issues are going to happen. And that's why we are taught that relevant du'as. We are told to make the dua, Allahumma allif bayna qulubina, wa aslih dhata baynina, wa hdina subul as-salam. Oh Allah, unite our hearts, mend our relationships. This is speaking to the fact that this is going to happen. It's bound to happen in your family. But you've got to make dua. You've got to work towards it. Life is not as simple as right and wrong, day and night. If it was, we wouldn't have had tensions. But the fact of the matter is, as Maulana mentioned, there's generational gaps. There's a different way of thinking. There's a different temperament on different people's side. So we've got to manage all of this. And dua is a very powerful weapon in managing our affairs at home. We must turn to Allah Rabbul Izzah. We are taught not just one, but many du'as. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما. This is a dua that every parent ought to be making every day, at least 5 times a day after every salah. That, oh Allah, bless me from my children and my spouse, such people who are coolness to my eyes. So we are told to make dua in this regard. And remember, whenever we are being good to one another, we're not doing goodness for their sake. We're doing it for the sake of Allah. And when we bring Allah into the equation, then everything changes. So you be nice to your wife because you want Allah to be happy with you. And likewise, the other way around. The minute we bring Allah into the equation and we change our niyyah, then you see khair and barakah coming in that relationship. May Allah protect us all. And as Maulana mentioned, that unity starts from the ground going upwards, and not the other way around. The more united we are, the more the khair and the barakah in our own homes will be. And the more disunited we are, the mercy of Allah will be lifted from that home. May Allah bless us all. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.